Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of No More Kids in Scientology. This episode is a turning point in the road that we've been traveling for a while, which so many of you in this community have heard our voices, heard our testimony, heard what's happening to kids inside the Scientology hotels, and have raised hell to make sure that we're here being heard, spoken with dignity, which is what any survivor of what we've been through would want in order to recover. So without further ado, I am going to bring up Ann Andrews and Kimberly Pagonia and Mona. Mona is a fierce advocate that's been working with us to fight for kids being protected. And I would like Ann and Kimberly to introduce yourselves to us, please.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name's Ann Andrews. I'm an attorney in Newport Beach, California. I founded this law firm several decades ago now, and one of our primary practice areas is advocating, changing the law, working on legislation, and litigating on behalf of victims of all kinds of abuse, between sexual assault, gender violence, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and we are committed. We have a team of attorneys that's large. We have a staff of trauma informed, and if you don't know what that is, I'll let Kimberly DeGoni explain it to you. I'll introduce in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But we have learned from very experienced people like Kimberly DeGoni to my right here that the practice of this kind of case requires extra special treatment and understanding of victims and their journey to get justice or to bring a case forward. And it starts from the first time we talk to them, which is confidential and protected under privilege across the United States, that when you talk to an attorney, even before you are signed up and engaged in a formal way, that privilege obtains. So we want to give survivors of all kinds of assault, institutional assault, religious assault, government, prison. We represent schools, other religious communities. We represent clients across a broad sector, so we're vastly experienced and knowledge with the challenge these people have. And with that, I'd like to introduce senior trial attorney Kimberly DeGonia, who comes to us from heading up the sex trafficking division in the team in the county of Riverside, sex trafficking and sex crimes. Has tried hundreds of these cases, and I'll let her say a few words about our practice and how we approach it. She chairs that department.
Hi everyone, I'm Mona. Hi Serge, thanks for having us. As Ann indicated, I've been prosecuting for about 15 years, specifically centered around trauma from survivors, whether it be sex trafficking, child abuse, sexual assault, abusive head trauma, violent acts, violent sexual acts. And I've tried almost 100 cases, and that doesn't include the hundreds of pretrial motions that I've done with survivors throughout the past 15 years. About 2 years ago, I transitioned my career to Ann Andrews' firm because I felt like there was a large need for survivors like you, Serge, to have their voice heard in a different forum, not just the prosecution office, but here in a civil forum where a civil attorney can fight against these organizations across the states that house predators within. So we here specialize, like Ann Andrews said, in survivors of being sex trafficked, physically abused, sexually abused, labor trafficked, and we routinely go up against these organizations seeking to hold accountability and to bring voices to our survivors.
That is so wonderful. And I mean, especially speaking from experience, like when my journey of leaving Scientology as a kid that grew up in it since literally from cradle to the moment I left, it was very disorienting, having had no formal education, not an understanding whatsoever of how the law works, how police works. I didn't even understand the difference between a civil attorney, what's a criminal prosecution. so many confusing things. So to have the power of your advocacy, which I saw firsthand in the Mormons podcast, the way that you guys so eloquently spoke. And when we talk about even the the trauma informed approach, it's like it's the first time that I have specifically felt that advocates dignify the survivor through the experience, which is so important, right? Because like the whole experience for us was dehumanizing. We were being dehumanized since we were kids, being told we were adults. So it's very hard to go through this process of even seeking any law or any accountability, because it throws us right back to where our trauma started, which was all about having a case, having people advise us on this is right and this is wrong. So it's been so wonderful to see the advocacy and the clarity in the ways that you guys have spoken about the law, which I left Scientology and I thought the law was like this like ridiculous thing, like that was just like all this like mumble jumble legal schmiegel, I call it. But it's actually clarity and it's actually common sense. And it's like the more I study it, the more I see how it's written. It is written to care for us, but we have to understand it, and we have to have people, more importantly, that are advocates that can understand what we went through. Because as a survivor of all this trauma, your brain is pretty fried by the time they're done with you abusing you that much. So it's hard to even disentangle for what was illegal of what happened. Like everything seems so normal when we were there.
Well, so let me talk a little bit about what we know that the journey is for survivors of all kinds.
Yeah.
And even though it might be different from, case to case, which it clearly will be, the general concepts are this, and this is probably of the top things that I would want your listeners to understand. This country of ours, and this state where we sit, we have a national practice, so we can bring a case anywhere, according to the laws of how we bring a case, where it will be filed. But let's just say the state in which we sit, where we practice a great deal, and I think a good number of your survivors will be having cases that will be venued in our state of California. You have more rights as an individual, no matter what happened to you, as a victim of any of these crimes that we call civil rights as torts in this state. The greatest amount of rights in any place in the world is in California. Wow. So the protection for victims, the laws that protect victims, the court system, right down the street in every county, including in the federal system, if we use a federal series of laws, the channels of law, and the in our toolbox, the things we have to use against organizations of all types who allow children and adults to be victims of crimes. We have so much opportunity for them in California, and protection within the government system, the judiciary system here in California. It's the biggest in the world. It's the most educated. Our laws are the most progressive, and they really lean toward protecting victims. So one of the things that Kimberly has taught me, and I've learned firsthand, is one of the biggest fears that victims have is, so I have a lawyer and then I have to go to court. Now what? How can I deal with that? It's a public forum. Well, we as lawyers who handle court cases for victims of trauma, we know how to get them through the process. We know how to make them feel supported. We know how to make them feel safe in a trauma-informed way, to give them the courage. And if we had if we had clients on this call that we've represented that could tell you the journey of going through a trial was literally healing, but and life-changing for her. Mm-hmm. What she would also say is, I had to find the courage to do it. And this law firm walked me through every step of the way. We literally lived with this client almost every day of her life to get her so confident to get in the courtroom. And so when you feel surrounded like that, and I'll let Kimberly speak to the difference between the criminal system, what we've offered in the criminal setting is we will also support our clients and help them in the criminal system. There's a series of laws that allow us not to step in the shoes of an attorney general or district attorney or prosecutor, but to actually support and advocate for the victim inside the criminal trial. So we can walk that path with them as well. Not something Kimberly should speak to.
Yeah, so in California, like Ann said, we have some of the highest protections for survivors as they enter into the courtroom. And one of those protections is something called Marsy's Law that was implemented several years ago here in California. But Marsy's Law gives the victim, the survivor, rights in the court system. Rights such as if you want to have an advocate sitting with you on the stand, because it's overwhelming. It is overwhelming to sit across from the perpetrator or the organization that allowed this sexual assault to go on for years, sometimes decades. It's intimidating. So the law grants a survivor that right through Marsy's Law. They have the right that their voice must be heard in a criminal proceeding every step of the way, whether the case pleads out, whether the case gets sentenced. And so we have these tools in our toolbox here at Andrews Thornton that we use and we implement in our civil trials as well. Educating the judges here in California that, hey, this is a sexual assault survivor case. That means you must treat our witnesses, our victims, differently than you would the average plaintiff's case in a civil firm. And so with that knowledge, like Ann said, it really allows us to come alongside our victims and our survivors in a completely different way than most civil lawyers do. You know, you go prosecute a case in criminal court, the attorney and the district attorney, the attorney general, they're there representing the people of the state of California. They're not there to represent the individual victim. They're there to bring protection and justice for the state of California, whatever county it may be. When you're a client of a plaintiff's law firm like ours, like Andrews Thornton, you are our client. And all that means, not just the Marsy's Law protections from California, but the protection of the rest of the team that's coming alongside you, that's guiding you through this trauma that's going to resurface no matter what, because you're going to trial, because you're facing the abuser. But it's also, like Ann said, very, very healing for our survivors. They find that this is the moment where their voice really is heard. This is the moment where they feel empowered to stand up against the abuser or the institution that did this to them. And unless you have the knowledge and the tools to come alongside your client like that, I don't know that you're doing them a good service. And so here at Andrews Thornton, Ann really stresses that the lawyers need to be trauma informed. They need to understand the process. They need to understand the inner workings and how we best support these clients.
Yeah, so let me say a little bit about what the challenges are of helping victims of sexual trauma inside an organization that has what we call a closed system.
Yeah.
And what a lot of your listeners might be interested in feeling that they're part of a change. They're part of a cause for change.
Yeah.
Let me say, as an attorney practicing for many decades, that there has been a paradigm shift. I handled these cases in the 90s in the entertainment industry, where women were being viciously attacked way before anybody ever heard of a guy named Harvey Weinstein. And the attacks that were made on my clients, the disruption in their life, the harassment, and these were women in the Professional Writers Guild, drove them away, drove them to the East Coast to start new careers. And the apologies that they made to me that they couldn't go through it, and these were highly educated, Ivy League trained women. There's been a paradigm shift since the 90s. And we've experienced it in our clients, we've experienced it in the judges, we've experienced it most importantly in the juries. Victims are being believed. And the journey that this blind attorney takes the jury on the journey with the client as if it had happened to her. And to show that grief and to show that horrible experience of emotional pain and suffering that the client goes through, revisiting those experiences to tell the jury when they're sitting in the courtroom is a very, very, very emotional and powerful time in the victim's life. It may not be for everyone, right? We understand that. And we meet the victim on the path wherever they are. It might take months for a victim to tell us all that happened. Like when you talk to a man in a case involving an institutional abuse, it almost always starts with so-and-so messed with me. Like all victims' language describes in a way that they can only handle it when talking to a stranger. though we're not strangers after we walk the path with them
Yeah.
for months at a time, 6 months at a time. They work with our counselors, they work with our staff. But we let the victim tell the story when they're ready. Not everyone can come to Andrews and Thornton or any law firm and just the way we do an intake on a case involving a fire or a defective drug or product. Just the facts, client, just the facts. These are people who cannot be required or forced in an uncomfortable, unprofessional way to give their story and to give the real facts that will be pled in a complaint until they're ready. But we always know when it's there. We always know on the path to them being able to share what actually happened and as much as it happened and as long as it went on. It takes a relationship. So we are relationship building attorneys. You know, a lot of firms do an intake, what we call a factual intake on a client, and when they don't get the information they need, they say, sorry, we can't help you. Because they don't understand. They don't understand that what that client is going to be able to tell you in next week or the week after or the month after, or several months after they believe that they can go through the process with you. That's when the real facts of what happened will come out. So we protect them through that journey. How these cases present is because, and why it's not going to stop in many of the organizations that operate the way a number of them do, is what we call the closed system organizations. A closed system is an organization that has complete control over the members. And I'm sure there's a parallel to the organization you advocate for victims against, as there is other religious and institutional organizations. There are women that fear for their life. I represent women in the music industry. You know how difficult it is for them in business because they're going to be blackballed, and how stifling that is within. You know, we all know there's about to start a trial of a horrible sex trafficker abuser in the hip hop industry.
Yeah.
Guess what? It took them years to find their voice, to get to a prosecutor, and for the world to believe them. So we know every industry, every organization, every closed system creates an environment where predators thrive. And when predators thrive, the national crime statistics says that a single predator will get somewhere between 50 to 150 victims in the time before they are severed, eliminated from the organization, prosecuted, in prison, incarcerated, or die. So every one of them come to court, as I've learned from Kimberly, and say at the sentencing, it was only just this once, Judge. It was only just this once. For that person to say that, and judges are well aware of it in sentencing, he and she sitting on that bench knows that the crime statistics tell them not to believe when the predator comes in, often having brainwashed their victim into saying, you know, I don't know of anyone else. I can't think of anyone else who might have assaulted or she might have assaulted. Those are all the things we deal with. So our job as lawyers, particularly at this time, particularly in this critical moment of their lives, is to encourage survivors of sexual assault from all organizations, including the one that you so well advocate for, are able to feel that they can come forward at a time earlier than almost all do. Right? That if they can come forward to seek advice and counsel before the technical deadlines of the statute of limitations run out, we want organizations like yours to let, in audiences like this and forums like this, to let people know, if you call an attorney, whether it's our law firm or another law firm, you have a privilege, a privacy, a confidentiality privilege that cannot be violated, that maybe will give people courage to come forward sooner. We have files in the office, you know, somewhere between 50 to 75 files that we heavily investigated of terrible acts of sexual assault against closed organizations that couldn't survive the statute of limitations defense. And I think as I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm certainly not an anthropologist, but I can tell you, or an expert in religions, but or these organizations. But what I can say is, it seems to me that the tighter the control the organization has over the survivor, and the more influence they have over the family and over their welfare and over their future, and the fear that they're going to be severed from their family, outcast, attacked or harassed, or the repercussions of them, if they have fear of any kind of personal repercussions of the organization should they leave and speak out with counsel or with a criminal proceeding, that we think that those numbers are even higher in organizations that have the most control over their members. And I'm sure you can think of other, we're very, very active in cases involving the Mormon Church, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that controls in every way they can the victims from going outside the system to report. They use a hotline. The bishops, which are those that get the reports from their members, that goes right to the desk of an attorney in Salt Lake City. So it's not a system where they're encouraged to seek outside support and help that will really advise them of their rights and of the opportunity to file a criminal complaint and file a civil complaint as a parallel way. If the prosecutor isn't in jail, there will be more victims. And it's not going to stop in our society until organizations face the facts and face the reality, and a system of laws forces them to, which I'll talk about in a minute. Nothing's going to change. Law firms like ours are going to continue to have inquiries about horrible abuse. And, we have a number of cases on dockets that are filed that have unspeakable acts of abuse against children. And the interesting thing is they're corroborated. We have clients who will call and say something horrible happened in a place, in an organization that professes to be a religion and caring and human towards its members, only to have a horrible acts of abuse against children. And then another person will call that was in the same place at the same time, but 2 years later reporting the exact same thing against the exact same predator. And that's just luck. That's just the luck that those two victims called the same professionals. So we know for those two women that have hired us, there's dozens more out there. Not too far from where I'm sitting in an organization, formed not too far from here, maybe a 20-minute, 30-minute drive, that are still locally living and too fearful to come forward that it happened to them. So our goal in advocacy and in legislation, in trying to extend the statute for victims of all kinds of gender violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, to extend the statute out of fairness to these people. Now, there have been doors, right? We have open, we call them little windows. They're more like windows than doors of legislative opportunities for people to come forward for a short period of time. Usually it's a year. Sometimes we've extended it. But that's all up in Sacramento. We would like to, and we're working on a permanent fix for this. Because if you take the Catholic Church as an example, one wants to believe that after all that's happened, Spotlight and all the litigation which we're deeply involved in, that the reforms in the church, and hopefully with this new pope, because the last pope was very, very activist about coming forward and admitting and trying to reform sexual assault inside the Catholic Church. And it's part of the reason why he wasn't very popular in his conclave. But we know that story now, right? Yeah. It's not a secret. But 30 years ago, when the man who started those cases in Boston was not believed, he didn't have the approach that Kimberly and I have about stopping it through legislation. We would like to see the laws for sexual assault of all kinds rolled back forever. That whenever someone comes forward with an act like this from a child, that they have well into their 30s, 40s, even 50s to make a claim, because they're disabled from doing so. Obviously, the purpose of this podcast and our mission, our statement to you is that we want organizations to help people get there before their rights have expired.
Yes.
And that's the challenge. I'll turn the mic over to Kimberly.
Yes, I just echo what Ann said. I mean, Serge, you had this experience yourself where by the time you finally deconstructed out of the organization, you were able to understand the breadths of your abuse. The statute had long ran in both, all of the states actually, that you could have brought your claim. So it's important to get the education out there.
Well, and I like what you guys said about the legislation, right? Because we're all going with this legislation that is so actually outdated for what it was supposed to be managing, because cases like this haven't been put on the docs for the law to become fully aware, right? Because everything is, as long as it's not said in court, is alleged, right? So like we could say horrible things were happening to us if there's no case that actually proves that, that nothing changes, right? And that's why we're here at this pivotal point where, I like what you said, what you guys said about the journey, because this is a journey and it is taking your power back. And for me as a survivor is, having gone through that horrific experience, the only silver lining, the only power I have is to be able to advocate how I would have wanted someone inside there when I was there be advocating for me on the outside. That's what me now being grown decades after I left, that's all I get. That's all I get. There's no childhood. There's nothing coming back. There's no restitution. Everything has been spent out of you, but you don't want this to be done to other kids and people like me that saw this, that was put on the front lines of the most disgusting things that Scientology does to underage kids. I'm aware I was put there. I'm a firsthand witness of the disgusting things, and I am disgusted. I'm appalled. I'm disgusted. I believe that a lot more adults should be disgusted with themselves. They should really start looking at what they're doing, right? Because it's like, we're talking about very closed systems, right? It's like in Scientology, I love that because we've never had words like closed system. I didn't understand how that contributed to the trafficking. Like you explained that so well in the Mormon stories. It's like, it's the fact that they were closing it to make sure that they could continue monetizing, profiting, not tarnishing their PR. Like it was done with that purpose. And then that makes it trafficking. Like people think trafficking is just motel stops and with truck people. And it's not like that. This was a luxury hotel where Tom Cruise is showing up. John Travolta, all the creme of la creme is coming here, and there's underage kids running around everywhere. And in the case of Florida, like we just found out that there's mandated reporter rules. Like we didn't even understand what a mandated reporter was. And I've been on this journey for 10 years. It's like, it's taken so long for us to grab our bearings to ourselves and then to be able to, because again, we care that no more kids go through what we did. That's it. It's like I am holding the Scientology parents' feet to their fire because there is no excuse to what they're doing. And that's what advocating means. You cannot abuse kids and call it a belief. If you commit a crime, it's not the euphemisms used in Scientology to rebrand all these things that they were doing to us. It's the fact that we were kidnapped, unable to leave our room, locked up against our will for hours on end, being video recorded, interrogated as if we were getting some deposition because we committed a crime. Meanwhile, we had committed no crime. We had no access to any legal attorney, person, nothing. Every parent says, this is great, this is wonderful, you're going to get a lot out of it. And kids do not get anything out of it being put and exposed to power dynamic imbalances that are so egregious, disgusting, and indefensible that I dare one Scientology parent come forward with a good reason why these things should continue to happen to underage kids. Because that was also my big revelation, and coming out of this. If you want to be an adult and get into a lot of weird stuff that could be very extreme that you and I might not like, this is America. You're allowed to do that with the people that you're doing that if it's all between adults. You do not have that level of willy-nilliness to expose kids to things that you do, like what I realized through this journey is kids are owed advocates. Like, they are owed it. If we're going to be a society, you have to be there for those kids. Like, kids cannot defend themselves. Like, we were so naive, so gullible. Every cockamamie story they told us, we believed them. We were groomed through teddy bears and dolls and clay demos and a course room, and everything looked so kid friendly. But It's the horror of what took place for how many decades and counting. We're talking 73 years of these rhetoric from a convicted felon. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard is a convicted fraud that was on the run with underage kids on a ship. I mean, it's like when you really go to the history of this, there was no good point where Scientology was, oh, it was great here, and then it really went awry here. The rhetoric of L. Ron Hubbard has always been disgusting, wrong, and indefensible. And there's so many words that people don't understand, and you really have to learn a new language to get what they're talking about. But that's why they did that, so they could create these hotels where they can bring as many underage kids as anybody wants, and purport that they have this like safe space to do what L. Ron Hubbard is saying to do, which is disgusting. And now I understand it's illegal. I didn't understand that at all before. I mean, it was also, sanitized and just everything was talking about something that wasn't the reality. And words matter. Words matter a lot. Descriptions matter a lot.
Well, let me talk about a couple things where I see organizations like yours can really help, and what our cause for change here is. So it's astonishing, surprising, regretful, dangerous that there aren't more criminal prosecutions of all the parties, right? We would like to, and we this law firm and through Kimberly's guidance are advocating all the time for more prosecutions. It often happens that we represent victims of incredible abuse that was known by many active members high up in the organization, where no one was ever prosecuted. And I'm not just talking about the predator, right? What ends up happening, the rhetoric in litigating these cases is that was the predator that did that. It wasn't us. That was the predator who committed those horrible crimes and acts on that child. It wasn't us. And we didn't have a duty to that child because we're just the church. And members do these things to each other just because they also happen to be members of the same organization does not make the organization liable. Well, we all know that there has been little or no criminal investigation into the closed structure that actually does set up a system that does traffic children, that does allow for the sexual assault and the lack of mandated reporting inside the organization. And that what we're advocating for is for more criminal investigation. We will jump into a case and start that process with the client. There are protections within the criminal system for the witnesses too, parallel with the civil case. But it's astonishing to us, and we're on a journey to have more of these cases criminally prosecuted against the predator and the organization that covered it up, that participated in it. Also, too, we are very concerned that children that are not given a voice for this and that can't break away, whether it's parental or societal or cultural influence, that they feel that they can't get away from that. That if this was happening in a county where children were being, Kimberly handled some of the highest profile cases involving foster care, terrible treatment of children in foster care. Prosecutors leaped on that case. It was highly prosecuted. The name of the case?
Oh, Turpin.
The Turpin case, where Kimberly rescued hundreds of kids, dozens of kids in a basement. Those cases jump out to prosecutors. And what we don't really understand is why don't the same case as what happened to you, Serge, and other victims that we come in contact with, what we have to do to get criminal prosecution. We're finding that changing as well. We're finding that engaging with the right criminal authorities in the right way, with our watchful eye over the case, often helping and supporting our client and supporting with the facts. Let's just know that prosecutors are heroes, right? Criminal prosecutors of all kinds, but they need help from civil lawyers like us at times to support them, to help them understand. I've spent years I've spent the past 4 years studying organizations like this
Mm.
and understanding and I learn something new every day. Understanding how they operate, what they claim to be a religious practice, how unique they are, how closed they are, how they operate with inside the church and the organization. It could be a government organization. We have cases against school districts as well. Don't think that this is just about religion.
No.
It isn't. It's about organizations that harbor predators and don't tell the families of predators that they're predators in their midst that they're harboring. That's one of the biggest crimes against children. So getting the work out with our advocates and we find, and one of the things that has surprised us is since this paradigm shift in our culture, the
Hmm.
parents of children who have been abused have come forward, that they're activists, that they're outraged, that they're coming to a consciousness to take it to a criminal authority, to take it to a court system where they know that their rights are being protected and they know that lawyers can guide them through that process, but they're angry at what happened. And so we're finding a lot more support for the victims if they come to us soon enough.
Mm.
That's our key. That's our prayer. That's our hope that organizations like yours and rescuing children and rescuing adults, that whatever work you do, that top of mind is to get them into a safe place where we can engage with them about a criminal case. The prosecutor's not going to come to you. That's
Right.
a rare case.
That's right.
Like I said, in the foster system that's part of the government, they're all over that in the circumstances where Kimberly practiced so much. But
Mm.
getting them a worked out case and the knowledge about it is one of our missions here. Changing the law, getting the facts developed to get in the hands of a prosecutor if it's still within the statute, which statutes in criminal cases are very long,
Mm.
very long. So even after maybe a civil statute for a claim has passed, there still can be a criminal statute, and Kimberly is extremely knowledgeable about all that. So that would be our hope, that your viewers and that the word gets out through your channels, whether it's these kinds of podcasts or it's blogs or it's rescue organizations, which we work with a number of them. People have to know that getting to your legal rights analysis sooner rather than
Well, and it's
Thank you.
just the fact that
Go
you can
ahead.
facilitate it. Go ahead, Mona.
Oh, I
The
was
fact
just
that
going
you
to say thank you. One, it's been an honor to work with you guys. Kimberly, you have just been awesome to work with. Being able to talk with you, bounce ideas. I know the original proposal that I sent to you about a case was a little broad and a lot more general, and I appreciated the fact that we could talk about what you do, what your expertise is as a law firm, what the expectations of a case could be, how reporting is so important. I echo what you just said, Anne, about reporting is key because the prosecutors, the legal teams, and the law enforcement aren't going to come to you for a sad story. The unfortunate part of that is that a sad story is just a sad story unless you report it to somebody that can effectuate change. Until then, it's just a sad story and it just goes off into the winds. So having people report, coming to either you or their own attorneys, and having those reports made, if it's beyond statute of limitations, I'm sure the healing could be experienced, or the experience of just telling you could be healing for them. Or two, it could also be a report of pattern and precedents against organizations that do this against people.
what happened to you, what happened to Serge. You're all witnesses to
Exactly.
to the organization and perhaps the other survivors who have yet to come forward. You're all part of the same wheel of facts that can support each other. And that's what we try to encourage our clients to be aware of, is that, in social media and all the outlets, they have their own voice. They can find other people to help through their knowledge of what happened to them. And oftentimes these clients are connected to the same predator, to the same particular part of the organization to the leaders of the organization. We put together incredible patchwork puzzles of facts that all weave together. And the more we discover and the more clients reach out, the more we build. And I would cite you to an organization that's doing an excellent job called Floodlit. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's something we might want to talk about you starting for yourselves, but it's actually a website that lists the facts as you know them in cases and the facts as you know them that have been reported. You might want to take a search and encourage your readers, your viewers to look through the Floodlit organization to see how a well organized, committed podcast, how you'll see all the litigation going against who it's against in one of these organizations, one high profile one, and all the cases that are filed. You can just click on and read the complaint. So if somebody goes to Floodlit and says, oh my God, that's what happened to me, if there's a breakthrough, a moment of this person has already filed a case, oh my gosh, that gives the person courage that there are people following this. And Floodlit is, hats off to an incredible organized structure for reporting. And it doesn't have to be, fancy. It doesn't have to be, expensive. There's access to all these cases and their dockets across the country that can be posted to show people where to go to read and to learn. So I give them a shout out that their world and what they've done has made a big difference in one organization's ability, the reporting about one organization and the cases against it and what's happened with them, just on one website. So
That's incredible. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Haggis just posted the link for that. So if anybody would like to go to the Floodlit link, it's there.
You all have a common cause. You all have a common, everybody in this circumstance is of an organization, what we'll call organizational abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not the predator, it's the allowing the predator to get access. And, what I'll say finally is, all these organizations violate the rules and standards of practice and procedure. This law firm was part of the reorganization of the Boy Scouts of America. We were front and center in that case, and in the bankruptcy of the national organization, we were a voice for change in causing what is now the practice of every youth organization. Everybody that has children, no child is alone without two adults. All of the things that are in place to protect in organizations like Boy Scouts that have so many, children in good programs, but so much abuse occurred because it was a closed system, and they paid the price for closing those facts out that were discovered.
Right.
All those files for decades were up in the national organization before children were believed. They did not believe a child that reported that, guess what? A predator who was a saint in the organization's eyes, had done so many incredible things for it, had kudos from all walks of life, was a member of city council, school board, the leader in their community. Guess what? Predators know how to present their credentials to get access to children. And if they get shut out of one organization, they'll go to another one.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. So this system of abuse that continues in a cycle is, has to be talked about openly now. And I think it's growing. Like I said, the courts of where these cases are tried, we're finding amazing results for victims because they're being believed across the country. So the fear factor of being attacked, victim shaming, abuse of the witnesses, all things Kimberly's dealt with her whole career, that's gone. That's gone. It's changed.
Well, unless you're talking about Scientology, because they do the whole fair game. They're known for running like black ops on the victims to make sure that nobody comes forward. Because imagine, in all the years of Scientology's existence, there's not been any children that have ever been advocated for by the law. I mean, I think there's one case where a girl did have SA and then they were able to settle something out of court. But it's been so controlled from Scientology internal They really go above and beyond, probably. I mean, from everything I've studied, from listening to, what's going on with Epstein and Ghislaine, and from all other trafficking things, like, I say they are, Mary Poppins in comparison to what the L. Ron Hubbard system allowed. Because like you just pointed out, like the Boy Scouts had great programs for kids. Not if there's predators there, obviously, but in Scientology, the programs are not child appropriate whatsoever. The program that Scientology is exposing you to do, the level of consent, no kid can say that they can be a part of that. And our parents overriding our consent, full knowing what was expected, because they were getting these audits. They were getting in Scientology, they only do three things: audits, ethics, and courses. So all Scientology parents got audits, ethics, and courses. And all of these three things expose you to getting locked up against your will in a room. In an auditing, you're kept up in a hotel room against your will. In an ethics cycle, the same. In a course room, the same, right? So it's like all of these adults went through these experiences, but because they so-called believe that a child is an adult, I mean, that is a delusion. That is a psychotic, indefensible delusion. You cannot go tell a judge, oh, the reason I treated my child as an adult is because L. Ron Hubbard told me. Like, and that's, it's almost like we grew up with like these drug addict parents that were so high on their own power trip of L. Ron Hubbard telling them they were so special that they couldn't almost see the abuse that they were doing. Mind you, like, I don't know of any other organization that does this, but they would video record all the admissions. So you have an organization that video records admissions from sexual predators, that asks leading questions to see if they're doing that. Have you ever sexually abused a child? They have questions like that. Like, it's an incriminating question. Any lawyer would tell you that's against your Fifth Amendment right. Don't answer that. In Scientology, they're monetizing every time somebody answers that question, because they sell them programs, and we have an ethics program that's really going to help you with that problem.
They don't report that that person confessed that they just assaulted a child in the day before.
They video recorded, right? So they're like, how could they have said that they didn't know if you were video recording it? And, I was trained as a child to be transcribing these things. I, as a child, then at 12 years old, is when I was doing these interrogations on adults. I had to ask an adult how they masturbate, if they're thinking about me while they're masturbating. And I have to sit there with like a straight face. Oh, you were masturbating thinking about me? Okay, so, did you put any hand cream on? And I have to be writing notes of every question I'm asking the adult.
No child should have to be exposed to that.
No, none. I mean, but it's
that process, like what, in the civil toolbox, look, we can't promise anything, right? This is a forum here that you invited us to talk about how to handle cases of serious trauma.
Yeah.
But I think as our culture emerges and it starts waking up, Boy Scouts took 40 years to wake up.
Yes.
They had files called the Predator Files in their headquarters. We have absolved them of their sins. We had to move on. The nation and our clients wanted Boy Scouts to survive, right? A lot of people think we're here to put every organization out of business and to stop anything good that's good for children. And I can't really comment on your experience, Serge. It's just not in my wheelhouse. Though I will learn and listen to all of these and become educated. But I'm not here to talk about anything specific. I'm just here to say that the institutional change that occurred in Boy Scouts, the safe programs that were required by the litigation and required by the court, they're going to be monitored by safe scouting programs across the country, are in place because of work that this law firm did to understand what a safe youth program must do to keep their children safe, because of this woman and this woman who we fought within the construct of the court to get those changes in law. That's the law of that case. Those safe programs for youth and scouting, and the generous clients and the courageous clients that came forward to participate in that survivor run part of the case was to institute those changes, and we'll monitor them and sit on boards at a national level. I don't know that the organization you're talking about could be capable of that, but I know that the courts can change the way they deal with children. If we can be bold enough to get people into the system in the way in which the courts can say, there are various tools in our toolbox that can be used in all kinds of proceedings. We don't have time to give a legal, course on all the things that Kimberly does, between class actions and private actions and personal actions and criminal actions. We have an enormous toolbox in this state, and a very large one in this country. But survivors have to feel comfortable with support of organizations like yours to be able to talk without fear of recrimination and while we can protect them. And we're so grateful that you invited us today. And I hope if you have any questions of Kimberly, she can answer about anything. I'm just more the policy person, but particularly
Yes.
what happened. Well, I formed the firm years ago, and it's our challenge together, Kimberly being the first of the prominent prosecutors that are joining our firm. She's leading that department in cases. We have a case set for trial every month now for the next year. So we're doing it, and we want your clients, we want your listeners and your community to feel that they do have a voice. They do have a place where people will listen to them.
If you grew up in Scientology, I would 100% recommend that you do. I mean, this is like, having a lawyer is having to go to a doctor. You have to understand your case. You have to understand your rights. You have to understand what happened, what it means in the context of the situation. So for all the under radar kids that have left Scientology, like you said, and you could be afraid of repercussions or whatever, but this is a confidential call that you're having with an attorney. It's not guarantee any case. It doesn't guarantee a relationship, but it guarantees that somebody will be on the other line hearing what happened and understanding the framework of that, so that they can come back to you and give you some options, and give you some context, so that you can begin in this healing journey. Because again, if you grew up in Scientology, your whole entire formative years were slashed, brought into that system. So the more awareness we raise about this, the more of these survivors that have been through this process, is the more that we can be protecting kids that are there right now. Because no points we make outside of court will stand. And that's what the process requires. And, it's taken a million baby steps to even just get here to be talking to you guys. And I think that's very valuable for anybody who grew up in Scientology and had an experience there. It's like there's so many, there's just so many of us, because, all parents exposed us to Scientology. That was like the standard, the normal, like bring your kids in. They always bringing you in. So you see a lot of kids at the hotel, like everything looks very like childish, right? Like the courtrooms have dolls. Everything is a clay demo. Everything looks very innocent. But now that we're out as adults and we see, a lot of, my friends that now are moms and go, I cannot, having their own kids, they understand, like, I could not ever do that to my child under any circumstance. So the awareness is coming up, which is really, really great.
Well, you're a big part of it. So thank you from Kimberly and I and Andrews and Thornton. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk and learn. Like I said, we don't, the last thing I would say is I've learned from Kimberly, we cannot force people. They have, the thing that this firm does not do is pressure anybody to do anything until they're ready. And that's a process that we respect. And I've learned that every victim has their own fears, their own anxieties, their own worries that have to be resolved before they can take a step with us. But we're willing to start the journey with anybody who needs us. And we're an open policy here of pro bono. Until we have an engagement, right? With pro bono means, for the benefit of the
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
We want to hear from, we want to learn more. And we do it by talking a lot.
So can I go ahead and keep my reservation?
Is having said that, Anne, could you maybe discuss to the people that are listening or who we can talk to about what type of cases or what type of instances people should have to call you, whether they're sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, exploitation? what type of people should be calling you for this?
So actually, so that's a great question, Mona. Sexual assault is a very specific series of questions that need to be asked about a physical and a violation of a person's body, right? That's sexual assault. But there is a lot before that. There are states that recognize gender violence, where the whole sexualization of your experience with an organization is a violence upon your gender that doesn't require touching. It's a very technical area. So I can't, in the time we have today, I can't teach a law course, and we can't, take you through it. Labor trafficking, children that are forced to perform acts of service that are monetized by an organization are considering under federal statutes labor trafficked. And we all kind of know it doesn't have to be a sweatshop in Los Angeles or someplace in the world where children are literally put to work and paid cents on the dollar. But there's a lot of check boxes for what trafficking is. Sex trafficking is an extremely subtle. It's a statute that came into being. Sex and labor trafficking is a fairly new federal statute. We have filed cases under that statute, but it has its own needs to comply with the statute. But we're very skilled at all of these channels. Intimidation, coercion, these are all different kinds of civil wrongs. Stalking, whatever people were reporting that is a civil wrong that usually parallels a criminal wrong, but is to be prosecuted in the civil case, can all be actionable. But it takes, like we've said, special clients who can handle, who come forward within the statute of limitations, and can find a way to trust the process and to literally come and meet with us in person, journey, give us their story, help us understand what happened to them in the time that they can tell it. And in the way what they can tell it, not how we're going to tell it, but how they're going to tell it, and giving them grace and the benefit of all the time they need to tell us the story. We're reminding you back to what I said, when a man calls this firm, and men will often talk to women. We have many women on our team. We have a lot of excellent men too, but oftentimes a man paired with a woman, with Kimberly, me, Kimberly and her staff, a man will tell a woman 10 times faster what happened to him than he will ever tell a man.
Yep.
And that's the dynamic of gender. So
Yep.
we know how to talk to victims and who should talk to people who've been through these traumas. And we're very sensitive to it. So, look, we handle all these cases in essentially the same way, at a very high level, with kid gloves, with trauma-informed practice. And we are in many, many different lanes of sexual assault: institutional, educational, religion, governmental. Kimberly's going to be trying cases involving sheriff's departments, if you can believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Deputies in uniform assaulting children. This is a fierce warrior for justice for children, and your organization should have access to good lawyers who can experience and go through this experience with them at the level which they need it, and the trauma-informed way in which lawyers, unfortunately, you can't open a phone book and find
No.
an accident out on the freeway. God help all of us that survived freeway driving, but if you had a terrible accident on the freeway and you're looking for a top lawyer, there's probably a dozen within your zip code that can handle that case.
Yeah.
Right? It could handle anything that happened to you of something like an accident or some workplace horrible accident. There's lots of lawyers trained in that. Because of the delicacy of this, I think some of the problems that lawyers face, their own fear, and it's very, we went through a jury trial together, and the entire jury and the judge cried the entire trial. It's so emotional, and it's also so healing and cathartic. But a lot of lawyers, it just depends on who you are as a person. Like, we must be programmed. We have some God-given gift of being programmed to be able to handle the trauma of our clients in a way that we're not, we show up healthy and mentally well and organized to handle their trauma. And Kimberly's been through so much of it. We have to take care of ourselves too. There's a lot of
Yes.
self-care involved. And in Andrews Thornton, we advocate for all of that. So, you know, you just can't open the phone book and find somebody. And it is terrifying and it is fearful for me that a child's, even as an adult, to call someone being willing to talk about it and then to be turned away. You can imagine how stunting that is. So there are more of us coming forward. There are more lawyers that do this, but you know, we're not like you called us, Surgeon Mona. We're not easy to find, right? You found
No, it's taken me 10 years and the help of a lot of wonderful people like Mona. So
Thank you, Mona.
Mona,
yeah.
Serge, thanks for your time.
Thank you guys so much. Well,
It's a pleasure learning more about your organization and, you know, what you're doing.
Yeah.
thank you guys for your time as well. So
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
with that, guys, thank you much for tuning in today, and we will be seeing you all very soon. Thank you and bye-bye.
Best to y'all. Thanks.